If I look a little sun-kissed today, it's because I am. I've been a little tin bit kissed by the sun. My coworker Rob, gotta give him a little shout out. He may think that banana wine sounds disgusting, but like always, Rob is wrong. And bananas are cheap. Okay, so if you're making fruit wine a lot, you can get a lot of bananas, make a lot of banana wine, and it's not gonna cost a pretty penny. So that's nice. Fun fact about bananas. The collection of bananas connected at the stem is referred to as a hand, and individual bananas as fingers. I don't like that at all. I hate that. Creating this wine is going to be a little bit more time and labor intensive than other fruit wines you may be used to making, because you have to boil this for 30 minutes and then you have to let that mash cool to room temperature, and that takes sometimes like 8 or more hours. That's how long it took me to get the hot liquid all the way down to room temperature, because if you throw your yeast into boiling liquid, they will die. For the recipe I'm teaching you today, I'm adapting the much beloved Jack Keller's banana wine recipe. Before he passed away, he actually published a book detailing how to make wine at home for the beginner with a bunch of recipes in it. And this book, I love it. I absolutely love it. I haven't read the whole thing yet, but I'm about 30 pages into the introductory material, and it already proves that Jack Keller knew his This is a good book. I have a link in the description if you want to get it, or get it from anywhere. I mean, this is a quality book for any home winemaker. So without further ado, let's get to it. So here's the recipe. Don't worry, do not fret if you don't know all the things listed here. If there are things on here you're like, what's that? I'm going to explain everything step by step, carefully, systematically. So it's here, you can write it down. The absolutely essential items are in white, while the items in orange are not strictly speaking necessary, but still very highly recommended. So do the whole thing. So first thing would be our bananas. We are using 4.5 pounds of bananas, either fresh or frozen. Now there are several different types of bananas, some more exotic than others. I just used I think they're called dessert bananas from the grocery store. Now with the bananas, they need to be just overripe before you try to ferment them. They can't have any green, and they actually need to have some browning on them. Okay, they can't be like black all the way through, but they need to have browning and they need to be soft. That means that there's been sufficient time for the starches in the banana to turn into sugars. And so you get the sweet goodness of bananas in the wine. That's what you got to do. If you go to the grocery store and you buy a bunch of bananas that are kind of green, that means you don't get to make wine that day. You have to wait like a week. We're using the peels as well. Okay, so that 4.5 pounds is the total weight of the fruit, including the peels. The peels contain acids and tannins and those good banana flavors that will make the final product all that much better than if we just used the meat fruit stuff. 1.5 gallons of spring water. Pick your favorite kind of water. And if your tap water tastes really good, you can use that. It needs to be filtered. You need to make sure there's not any bacteria in there. So generally the safer bet is spring water. 1 pound of very dark maple syrup. I've been using this a lot lately, okay? And I like it. The maple syrup we're adding in here to add some complexity to the flavor, to get more of that bananas Foster flavor than the just simple banana. So maple syrup, 1 pound of it. 2.5 pounds of white table sugar. There's nothing fancy about this. Most people know what this item is. 1/8 of a teaspoon of wine tannin. Tannin is that component of bark or leaves or other fruit materials that is astringent and bitter in large amounts, but in the right quantity, it adds a complexity and structure to the mouthfeel and the flavor of a wine that it might be kind of tepid or flat without it. 1 gram of acid blend. The acid adjustment is, again, to round out the flavor profile of this wine. Without acid, much like without tannin, things can just taste flat. So it adds some character, some nuance. And yeah, if you taste it, if you put your finger on the powder and you taste it, it's sour. So it's acid. 1/2 teaspoon of pectic enzyme. Pectin is that polysaccharide in fruit that holds the cell walls of the fruit together. And if you have a bunch of pectin in a fermentation, sometimes what can result is pectin haze, which is a residual enduring haze in your wine. It won't clarify completely because of that. So you get pectin enzyme and it breaks the pectin down into smaller elements which don't reflect light. That's That is the simple explanation. But the even simpler one is use it because I said so. So just toss it in there. It'll be better because of it. So there you go. 3.8 grams of Go Firm. Okay, this is a yeast nutrient that we will be using today with our yeast. It's referred to as a rehydrating agent because you toss it in there with the yeast and some water, and as the yeast wake up and rehydrate, they can also absorb the nutrients from the Go Firm. So the Go Firm is for today, and you use that right now. 1.5 grams of ferment times 3. The reason I've stated it this way is that you're going to add 1.5 grams of ferment to your fermentation throughout the first week of fermentation. And you're going to do it 3 times at 1.5 grams each time. But more on that at the very end. I'll explain how you do that. But the basic concept here is there are 2 yeast nutrients. One for today, the Go Firm, and one for 3 different times over this next week after you pitch the yeast. 3 grams of Lalvin QA23 yeast. I like Lalvin QA23 and what it does with maple syrup. We've got 1 pound of it here, so that's why I picked this one. There may be better ones for banana wine, and if you have a better one, put it in the comments and teach me a little something or other. Alrighty, let's make it. Let's do this thing. The first step, as always, is of course to sanitize. I now have a cute little tutorial explanation video explaining everything about sanitation and cleaning. And if you want to watch it, click it. The link is right here or here on this side. I don't know. I can't rotate things in my head. So just watch it for more info. Then you need to prepare the fruit, okay? This is where things get a little more complicated than just throwing everything into a bucket and mashing it with your hands. I gotta do some other stuff with this. You're gonna get your bananas. You're going to cut each banana at an angle to create long diagonal cross-section slices, okay? And you're going to do that with all of it, with all 4.5 pounds. It takes a minute, but you'll end up with a big pile of banana slices. And then you're going to get a brewing bag, okay? We're going to end up boiling this. So you're going to need a pot and a brewing bag. And it's helpful to put the pot into, no, other way around. It's helpful to put the brewing bag into the pot, and then as you slice it, throw your slices of banana into the bag. And once you have all of them in there, go ahead and tie that bag off. Then add 1.5 gallons of spring water to the pot. If you can't fit the total quantity of water into the pot, that's okay. You'll just boil with slightly less than 1.2 gallons, and then you'll add in the remainder later as it's cooling. That's totally fine too. Then you're gonna put your pot of banana water on the stove, bring it to a boil, and then once it's boiling, put it on mid-heat and let it simmer for 30 to 45 minutes. Now, while it's still hot, weigh out 2.5 pounds of sugar and then add it in and stir it up. Because it's really hot, it'll dissolve much more easily than if we did it when it was cool. And then do the same with the maple syrup. Add in your 1 pound of maple syrup to the hot liquid. Then let it cool to room temperature. As I suggested earlier, this will probably take like 8 hours. Okay, this is a whole day little project, and you gotta plan for it accordingly. You could also refrigerate it after you get done simmering it. That might help it along the way, cut the time. Obviously, it's in the fridge, but I didn't do that. I just let it sit out. Next, we will prepare the yeast. This is what I referred to earlier, the rehydrating phase. So you're gonna get a little jar, okay? You're gonna fill that jar with just a smidgen, just a little bit of water. Then you're going to weigh out with the jar on your gram scale, tared out, zeroed out. You're going to weigh out 3.8 grams of Go Firm. There's links in the description to all the equipment and stuff, including the gram scale that I'm using today. It's in the description of this video. So just click all those links and you can get all your stuff. And once the Go Firm is weighed out, weigh out 3 grams of yeast. Then close off the jar and shake it up, okay? Get it all homogeneous. Then set it aside for at least 20 minutes. During this time, the yeast will wake up, will rehydrate, and will absorb nutrients from the Go Firm, creating the best chance of a healthy and happy fermentation. Once your must has cooled, carefully pour it into the brewing bucket that it will ferment in. With sanitized hands, get in there and mash up all of that fruit as much as you can. Now be careful you don't press it as hard as you can, because then some of that fruit pulp is going to leach out and it's going to make this take even longer to clarify later. So just mash it, but don't go crazy, okay? Then add the additives. 1/8 of a teaspoon of wine tannin. Just plop it right in. 1/2 teaspoon of pectic enzyme. Plop. And 1 gram of acid blend. For that, you got to weigh it out on the gram scale, okay? You can even get a little bit of water to help it dissolve, and then just pour it right in. then you're going to take an initial gravity reading. This will tell us how much sugar is in this mixture, and therefore we can calculate what we could expect to get by way of ABV, or alcohol by volume. In this case, the initial gravity was 1.090, so which means that if this ferments out totally to 0.990, we'll have about 13% alcohol. So that's pretty decent. I like my wines to fall between 11 and 15%. That's pretty good. Pitch the yeast, okay? Pour it in to your bucket. Don't forget to narrate that part of the video like I did a couple times ago, okay? Affix the lid to the bucket, okay? You gotta push down pretty hard. You gotta use some of that elbow grease, okay? Just get it on there. Then fill your airlock halfway with sanitizer water and affix it to the bucket. Put it in the grommet and get in there. Then label the fermenter and set it in a cool, dark place. I like to put it right under my desk and I don't worry about it. What can you expect as this banana wine ferments? The first thing to expect is a bunch of airlock activity. Banana and yeast seem to love each other. Like every time I've used banana in a fermentation, the fermentation just goes crazy. So expect to see lots of airlock activity. Bloop, 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 bloop. Lots of air, lots of bubbles, the good stuff. And that should happen within 2 to 48 hours. If it's been 3 or 4 days and you don't see nothing, go back and rewatch the video because you did something wrong, okay? I did explain it perfectly, no mistakes. So maybe your yeast are dead and you got to pitch some more yeast. As an aside here, don't move on to stage 2 of this winemaking process, my part 2 video, until all of the airlock activity has ceased, until you see nothing going through that airlock over a whole 30 minutes. Like there should be no movement at all. That's when you know it's done, basically. There's more precise ways, but that's a good rule of thumb. Secondly, you got to punch down that bag of fruit that floats to the top of the bucket every day. If you don't, you get a little bit of a risk of mold developing, but also you want to make sure that the fruit is inundated in the liquid to ensure maximum flavor extraction, okay? Thirdly and finally, that fermento. Now it's time. A day after you pitch the yeast and close it all up, you need to add 1.5 grams of Go-Firm. And then on day 2 and day 3. Okay, so for the next 3 days, you add 1.5 grams each day. About the relatively same time of day. So it's about 24 hours in between each dose. How I like to do it is I get a little jar, add a little bit of water, weigh out 1.5 grams, shake up that jar, and then pour it into the bucket. It's pretty simple. It's pretty easy. You don't gotta worry about it. That the fermento ensures a consistently healthy fermentation. If you add it all in the beginning, you might get a big peak here and then it goes all the way down. If you do it just little doses over the whole fermentation, it stays pretty steady and you get the best flavor profile, less wine faults, that kind of thing. Alrighty kids, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. I'm having fun with these videos. I'm having fun with these recipes. And I think I'm starting to hit my stride. So I appreciate the support and the comments. Always comment. I love reading that shit. And I always try to take all the questions and comments seriously. So comment away. Thank you for watching. Watch all of the videos I have to offer and have a wonderful day.